Today is a demo for QuizConforms. I've done several of these over the years that you can see on the QuizCon website and see different demos of different things. Today we're going to see specifically how we can use this tool, this app, to build a leave request system. Now, this is just an example of the many things that you can achieve in QuizConforms, which is basically a forms and workflow solution for SharePoint that uses the most simple and straightforward method of all. This is when compared to old methods to do custom forms in SharePoint. When we're talking about InfoPath, for example, it's a very clunky interface that required you to install an application, client application on your machine and build a clunky interface, and that had very complex rules and made it very hard to get form up and running. It also has the distinct problem of being deprecated by SharePoint, by Microsoft. Microsoft don't support InfoPath anymore. Then Microsoft are currently telling everyone to move to Power Apps, which again offers a very complex and very difficult interface for people to grasp, to design a form, and we'll see today how QuizConforms makes everything a lot simpler and a lot more accessible. So the problem still remains. We still want to enable users, or what we call power business users, the users who are from the business, who know what their need is. They need to create a form that solves a business problem. We want to enable them to do the work themselves. Maybe we want to bring in a developer to put some polishing touches or and do some more of the complex stuff, but we still want the power to be with the advanced business users. For example, in a project that I'm currently working on, I'm working with a business user who's managing a policy system, who's very clued on how to use SharePoint. He knows how to add lists. He knows how to add columns to lists. He knows how to play around a bit with HTML, but he's still a business user. And giving him a tool like InfoPath or Power Apps is overkill. It overwhelms him. It's more than what his skill set is for. Those are tools that are aimed more at developers. QuizConform comes to solve all of that. So here we are. QuizConform, quickly create powerful dynamic forms, no technical skills required. You basically create a SharePoint list using the regular SharePoint list interface, so the one provided by Microsoft, and then you use QuizConforms to tweak how the forms for that list look, and to add some customization behind the scene for either default actions that happen automatically, that happen when the form loads, or some custom validation. And we'll see some of those features today in the demo. Here's some example of a comparison doing the same thing between Power Apps and QuizConform. So in Power Apps, if you want to dynamically show and hide fields, you see how you have to do an Excel-like formula of saying, oh, if the request type is selected, value is general. So if they selected general, then true, otherwise false. Again, you need the user to be able to construct those kind of complex sentences and do it in an interface that may be quite confusing. In QuizConform, you have an interface that says, okay, we're adding a rule on the products field and saying hide it from these forms, new form, edit form, view form, when the lead type is not equal to product license. So you can see the user has a lot more options. Instead of having to know the syntax of saying visible equals formula, and the formula is the function is if the value is that, then true, otherwise false, you can actually construct in QuizConforms a much more logical, much more easier way of grasping and constructing the rules of whether something is visible or not visible, and also put more conditions on it. Whereas in Power Apps, if you want to put more conditions, saying on which form to hide, on which form to display, can we change some conditions more than just value equals general, but do several ands and ors? It becomes very clunky in Power Apps, not to mention the fact that managing it later, you need to pass out the formula that can become quite long, while here in QuizConforms, we can just delete or just edit the values. Another great thing about QuizConform in this example is when you select, when you want to check when lead type is equal to product license, once you select lead type, which is a choice field, all the possible choices are then automatically populated in the possible values, making it a lot easier for the user to know exactly what they can and cannot select. So a much better overall tool for business users rather than developers. Here's in Power Apps how to dynamically show and hide tabs. You have to write this kind of formula. You say, the card is visible if the selected value is something, then true or false. So once again, the same kind of a formula that can become quite complex and annoying to users to not only write but manage. While in QuizConform, again, it's a very logical saying the group layout, the group is upsell details, so that's our tab. And we're saying when upsell is equal to yes, and current user is in sales. So you can see we're already done something a lot more complex than this. This just in Power Apps, we just said the value equals something. Here we're saying that value is equal to yes, and the current user is a member of the sales team. Something that in Power Apps will become more and more complex the more of those conditions we add. In QuizConform, it's really and anyone can do it, and managing it is a breeze. Before I continue, I just wanted to mention that if at any point you have a question or if you have a note, please put it in the questions tab, and I'll keep an eye on it with one eye as I'm talking. And I promise that I'll try to answer everything that you ask. And I promise that we're getting to the demo in a minute. Okay. There's also in QuizConforms, we do have a sub app of the QuizConform that allows you to do cascading lookup fields. So, excuse the mistype there, my mistake. But you can do cascading drop downs where the user chooses a value in one drop down, which filters down the value in another drop down. So that's another thing that's very easy to configure in QuizConforms. And here again is a comparison of Power Apps versus QuizConforms, where if you want to do it in Power Apps, you have to do this whole patch and patch the employees to country, combine country with the state, with the data type, and a lot of very, very developer-oriented kind of formatting. Whereas in QuizConform, we just say, okay, we have the states list, and we're going to show the title of the state list, but filter by column in this list country. So you can see we have a country and we have a state. So we're saying the state list will be filtered by country, where country equals the selected value of country. So this is a much more, much easier, much simpler interface. And once you get to know it, very, very powerful, because you can do multiple cascading drop downs to almost an infinite level, where the user selects one thing, filters the next group, selects something in the next group, and filters the next one and the next one and the next one, as much as you want. One thing to note, comparing QuizCom to other vendors, and I'm not going to name anyone, but there is something in SharePoint with some apps called the provider-hosted app, and it's very important to note that QuizCom is not a provider-hosted app, and that's very important for all of you who are worried about the security of your data when using apps. When you're using a provider-hosted app, that means the provider data and all of it is hosted in their database, and it's not under your control, and it actually leaves your organization. QuizConform does not use it, it does not capture the data. Your data never leaves your tenant, and QuizCom does not have visibility to your data. Okay, with that said, we are going to go into the demo. There is a link here if you want to grab a free trial of QuizConforms. You just go to quizcom.com and start your free trial. But right now, I'm going to leave the PowerPoint alone, and we're going to jump into the demo, into the leave request system. No, why is that popping up? Okay, and I close my browser. Well, that's handy. Okay, while that loads, I'll load using this user. So for this demo, I'm actually going to flick between 3 different users, 2 users that are regular users in the site. We call them QA1 and QA2, just generic users for the purpose of the demo. And here we are, we're seeing one user, which is QA1, looking at our system. It's a site that we built just for vacation requests. The whole process of a vacations request is fairly simple. The user can create a new vacation request and ask to be asked to go on leave in a certain time. May I have to excuse the slowness of my internet? I think it's still asleep. It's only 7:16 in the morning. Okay, here we go. So when the leave request form opens, the first thing the user is being asked is for employee. Now, potentially the user can specify another employee, or they can specify themselves. If I choose another employee, there will be some restrictions which we will see later. But you can see I can choose another employee. Then I can choose a start date, and I say, okay, I'm going to choose tomorrow. Of course, today is tomorrow here, but we're seeing it in your time zone. So that looks like tomorrow. Tomorrow, so over the weekend, but including, it's basically a long weekend. I'm going to take tomorrow and Monday off. And then I'm going to say long weekend. The reason for why I'm requesting. Notice the vacation request policy. I'm going to get back to the vacation request policy, but this basically tells me the policy that the company decided is the policy about leave requests, and a bit of explanation about the workflow that tells us when you submit, it will be sent to your manager for approval. If the request is more than 5 days, an additional approval from the HR director is required. I'll get back to why this is important and why I want you to remember that. So for now, just remember that we showed the policy to the user. This is not editable text. The user cannot edit the policy. Also notice that when I selected QA2, it immediately populated the manager as Ishai. So it didn't ask the user who's the manager. It automatically knew who the manager. I'm going to show you how we did that later. It also populated, once I selected the user, how many vacation days has the user taken and how many vacation days they have remaining in the year. I'm going to submit the request, and it's telling me I have invalid values. So notice the invalid values. This is the built-in SharePoint message. There are invalid values, but also QuizConforms adds a message specifically that, oh, you cannot submit something that's less than a week ahead. So I can't ask for and notice that it said so in the policy. I can't ask for vacation starting tomorrow. I have to give my manager at least a week to approve or reject the leave request. Now, this is a great example of custom validation that goes beyond what SharePoint can give us. A regular SharePoint list cannot do this, where we say a specific field has to be, let's say, 5 days in the future, and we're going to show a nice alert when that happens. There are some ways of doing it in SharePoint, but then it becomes a bit complex. So I'm going to choose next long weekend from the 6th of 4th. So from Friday to Monday. Submit request. Okay, so you saw that please wait. So not only did we now create an item in the list of leave requests, it also did some other things behind the scenes, which I'll show you later. So you can see now that I have a leave request in process. It's now in progress, and sorry, that's a previous one. So not sure why that. No, I think that is that one. I think I just chose too many days. It shows me my leave request, which I can go back and view. And if I switch to the manager, let me just do that. I accidentally closed my browser earlier. Sorry, the manager is actually a different user. And as a manager, I can see that QA2 requested 3 days leave between those 2 dates, and that's waiting for my approval. If I can go and say I want to edit this. So I'm basically viewing the form. Okay, this is all these pop-ups on the trial version with this account. Okay, so I can see the form. I can see, okay, that's the user. I'm the manager. That's the vacation days they took. That's how much they remained. This is what they asked for. I can see here a log of what happened. So I can see here, this is a very nice alternative to version history. It actually shows me a nice log saying this user made edits. This user created this item. So that's a easy way for me to see it. Notice here at the top, I also have 2 useful buttons, approve request and reject request. So that's very useful for me to say, instead of I can edit this and say, oh, okay, you told me on the phone that you made a mistake or something. I can edit this and save, or I can just click approve. There's no other ways for the workflow to progress except clicking either approve or reject. So I'm just going to click approve. Now, while doing that, I'm going to jump over, and now I'm just making sure I'm that user. Sorry, I'm QA2. Okay, so you see, if I choose QA1 as the person I'm asking for, then QA2 is named as the manager. So that is what I wanted to show you. So I'm going to switch back to QA1, to the first user, and I'm going to create another leave request, this time from myself. So the user picks for themselves. The reason being, I want to show you another scenario. So notice in the policy, it says if the request is more than 5 days, an additional approval from HR directors is required. So let's do that. So I'm going to choose starting on the 4th and do more than 5 days. Let's do a lot of days and submit. Okay, so now user QA1 asked for more than 5 days. Let's switch to the manager, user QA2, and go to the home page. Although their email is slow to load. We can see that the user QA2, who's the manager for QA1, just got a new email, which for some reason, Outlook is not showing me. There it is. Okay, got an email saying new vacation request has been submitted for your approval. Please click the request, and we click on it and we get to the form for that request, which is the same form we would get to if we were here, my leave request. So the stuff that's waiting for me here. Here we go. So the manager clicks on the link and reviews the request, says, okay, I approve this. Oh, why is this signed out? It's all my mistake for closing the browser earlier. So I think it needs to re-authenticate. Which for some reason is taking a very long time. Okay. Okay. So you can see the request is still in process. It was approved by the manager, but it's still in process. It's not really approved. If we go back to the home page and refresh it, or let's do it on this browser. You see, we have a tab here called waiting HR approval. Let's wait for the content to load, and we can see we have several requests waiting for HR approval, which then HR goes in and approves or reject. At which point the emails flow and everything that we've just seen continues. I think by now you get a vision of the complexity and at the same time simplicity of the solution. It's a very simple state machine workflow where the user makes a request, which goes through several phases of approval depending on the content of the request and who's the manager, how many days it is, and we also have some validation. So that was the system I wanted to show you. It's an example system that we built that uses some of the basic features of the product. What I want you to see now is how we actually built it and how you can build a system like that, not necessarily for leave requests, but how flexible the product is to answer all your needs for those kind of workflows and approval. So we're going to start with the field constraints. First of all, before we do that, let's start by seeing what's the data behind the scene. What does it all look like? And I have to do it on this browser, which logged me out. It's very annoying. And I refresh the page. Okay, so on this browser, we can see we have two lists, main lists that we're using. We have the vacation request list. Let's open it in a new tab, and we have the employee vacations. That's a bit misnamed. What the employee vacations list is actually a small configuration list that we have created just to capture some of the more configurative and behind the scenes data, the stuff that the user doesn't edit. And you can see in the employee vacation, we have for each employee, so here's the employee, we say how much leave do they get per year. So for example, we can see that Sarah gets 20 days, QA1 gets 22, QA2 gets 20, and so on and so on. And then we can see here the calculation, how much did they take, how much do they have left, and who's their manager. So this is a simple way for us to define who's their manager. Now, the definition of who's the manager doesn't have to be in a list. You don't have to create a list of users. You can use information from Active Directory and stuff like that. That just makes the demo very complex to show how it all ties together. So we just chose for this demo, we're going to show you the information living in the list, but just be assured that you can make a solution that ties into external sources of data, not necessarily a SharePoint list. So this is just the list for configuration. We will see how the solution then reads or writes into this list. One thing to note is we can see here that this is where it was defined that QA1, the manager is QA2, and QA2, the manager is myself. And that's what we saw earlier in the demo, where I chose QA1 and it immediately knew that the manager is QA2. Now, the other list that we have, which I had open here, there it is. This is the list that actually captures the data. This is the list that we have customized with QuizConforms. This list is all the requests, and you can see the latest request that I opened. There's a request for 12 days, there's a request for 3 days. The request for 3 days, the first one I did, was approved. The other one is still in process because HR didn't approve it yet. It tells us who's the employee, and we can click to see the request. When we click to see the request, the form that opens is the same form that we saw earlier, that has the buttons to approve or reject, or it has the nice formatting with the tabs that or the accordion tabs that show us all the fields of the request grouped together in a more pleasing user interface and the user experience. There it is. And of course, all the trial alerts. Okay, so you can see this is the customization is on the list itself. What we had on the homepage was just a web part that shows us all the requests grouped in different views. So it's an example of a web part that we have as part of QuizConforms. But you can use it without that web part. You can just go to the list and start creating new items or viewing new items. Now, let's jump into the configuration of that list. And how did we make all of this come together? In the list, in the menu, we'll wait for the menu to load. Here we go. We have the QuizCon apps link in the menu. This shows us all the available apps that are installed on my tenant that the current user is allowed to use. And that also only shows to users who are able to manage the list. So if I'm going to go to the same list as a regular user, in this case QA2, so if I open, what was it called? Employee vacations. No, sorry, that's the wrong one. Vacation requests. That's the one I need to go. Vacation requests, that's the one. In vacation requests, as a regular user, I don't get the QuizConf button because it knows that I'm not, I cannot configure anything on this list. So I'm going to switch back to a user who can. So these are all the QuizConf apps that are installed for me. That together they make up QuizConforms. Although if you're interested in just one of them, you can purchase them separately for your tenant. So we're going to start by looking at field constraints. Field constraints, we have a minimum of 3 in the list that we've just seen. One is validate start date. So you can see here start date, validate that it's not empty. So it's a required field, but also make sure that it's greater or equal to today plus 7. Otherwise, show a message. Let's see what happens if I click on this. It then allows me to edit it, and then now I can change it to say it has to be 5 days instead of 7 or whatever I want. I can remove the rule. I can move the rule up so it's before the empty. I can add conditions to the rule. The conditions is saying only apply this rule if that condition is true. So you can see I can add a condition. I can say that's only when the employee is not equal to a certain person, and yeah, so that's an example for excluding based on who the employee is. We're actually going to see a better example, so I'm gonna leave that rule now. Let's see the rule for the end date. We can see the end date validation is validate that it's not empty, otherwise show it's required. Validate that it's bigger than the start date, makes sense. And validate that it's no more than 20 days after the start date. Otherwise, we're showing request vacation too long message. So that prevents users from asking for a massive vacation. We can also see that employee has a validation rule saying, if it's not equal to me, show you cannot request a vacation for other employees. You will immediately ask me, hey, Ishai, we just saw you asking for requests for other employees. So notice the condition here, when current user is not in the owners group. That means we let the admins or we let users of a specific group request on behalf of other users. So if I wanted to create a new rule, I can just click new rule, and I can say to employee validate is equal to someone else, or it's empty, it's not empty, contains. So you can see all the things here to do with user fields. If I wanted to create a validation rule for another field, all I need to do is go to the top and say, I'm going to choose another field. So for example, I want to choose the title field, and I'm going to create a new rule for the title field. And you can see the validation rule options change because the title field is a text field, not a user field. So I have a lot more options for validation, like the length of the title field, matches pattern. So for example, this is for other applications that you can create. You can say the pattern has to be an email address. So I want to validate that the user put in an email address, or the pattern has to be postal code, or the pattern has to be a link. And those patterns are things that you can add to. So if you have your own patterns, or if your postal code patterns differ from the ones that are listed, you can create your own patterns. But that's not for today's demo. I just wanted you to know that that's possible. So that's what I wanted to show you about validation rules, how easy it is to create validation rules for fields, and how for different types of fields, like we saw date, we saw user, and we saw text, different types of fields, you get different options in how you can validate, and it makes it very easy for you to create the validation rules and to customize the error messages that come up if it doesn't contain the if it doesn't apply the validation, if it doesn't pass the validation, and how the validation rules can be very complex, like they can only be applied under certain conditions. And those conditions can even refer to other fields. So you can say if the status is processing, only then applies that rules. If the status is approved, then apply a different rule. So you can do a very, very complex scenario for validation. Okay. Now, I hear you asking, what you saw when we clicked on the form, either new item or view item, what we saw, ooh, that's new, that's not what I meant to do. What we saw is a very customized form. I guess this is configured to do it in a pop-up, which I wasn't aware. So we saw the form is looking very customized and very much unlike a SharePoint list form. So this is very crucial in applications like QuizConforms or InfoPath. We want to show the users a nice to use and good user experience of a form. And we want to show these accordions or tabs among the space. And the way QuizConform does it is, sorry, I forgot where I was. I thought I had that open. No, there it is. We have an app called to configure the form layout. There it is, form layout. And when we click form layout, we are able, as the power users, to create groups. And when we create a group, so you can see I have a group called employee details, request details, and request status. And these are the groups that we saw earlier when we looked at an item. So we see employee details, and it's currently showing employee. The other two groups are not shown. Why is that? Because if we look at request details, it's show when employee current value is not empty. So if I go back to the item, I'm going to specify an employee. I'm going to choose myself. And once the employee was not empty, now I get it passed that rule, and now I get request detail. I'm still not seeing the other group. The other group is only shown when the status is not equal to new, because the status is still new. I'm not seeing it, but as you saw earlier, when I opened an existing one, so it wasn't new, the status was processing, I suddenly got the history log and everything. So you can see here that we have groups. How's the group defined? If I click on the group, you can see here that I can change the group name, so that changes the title of the accordion, and basically in the group layout, this is basically your form editor here. I can say I want to show the employee field, the vacation days taken, the remaining days, and the manager. That's all in one row. I can add another row, and in that row I can say, I want to show the approval log. So you can see here, this is how I'm adding rows to the form, selecting what fields will be displayed, and I can also add columns. So I can show multiple fields side by side or one field in a row. So this is our form building interface that allows us to build a form that looks exactly how we want. We also, aside from showing the fields of the list, we can also add a horizontal line. And if we want some text, a text cell that basically shows the user some text, and this is a rich cell. Sorry, here we go. So this is a rich editor that allows us to do anything like links, pictures. So you can have a form that's fully designed with pictures, with links, for example, for manuals or instructions or anything else, with videos that help the user fill in the form. So, example, text. Okay, so I just changed the form by adding to the first group called employee details. I added a horizontal line and a text cell, and I also showed you how I can add more and more fields and rearrange them either in rows or in columns. And then I can go to the next group, the request details, and see the request details is showing me the request policy. Remember, I told you we'll get back to the request policy. We're almost there, and it's showing me other fields. So now, if I go back and say I want a new item, we'll have to wait for it to load, and I choose the user. We can see the horizontal line and the text that I added were added to the layout. Okay, so that concludes what I wanted to show you about how to design the form. Let's go back and see. We have 3 more of these to see. Let's do a quick one: default values. So default values is where you can define what's going to happen when the form opens, when you just click view. And you can see here that we have a default value, and this is what I promised to tell you about the vacation request policy. So we immediately set the vacation request policy to a certain text. So in this case, the text is very simple, saying and giving the user some instructions. Now, you saw in the form layout that I'm able to add text as I want. I just said that's what it's there for. I can add text and instructions. Why are we doing this in the default value? Well, partially we're doing this to demo to you that we can add a default value to a field that the user then is not allowed to edit. But where do I see the benefit for you to know that, and not only to you but to the users? If we wanted to have an actual policy, but the policy, when it changes, we need to be able to change the policy, but also capture for each vacation request which policy it was created under. This allows us to create a default value that names the policy, and that gets saved with the list item. So when in the future we look at the list item, we can see what was the policy at the time that the leave request was requested. If we then change the default value, it just changes it to future leave requests, not to previous ones. And that allows us to do a tracking of where it was at the time of creation, and that I think is very useful. And that's all I wanted to show about default values. I'm jumping straight ahead to dynamic column permissions. This is one of the most powerful, I'd say the second most powerful tool in the tool belt of QuizConforms, where we can say something like the manager field, hide it in new item form, edit item form, view item form when the employee is empty. So until we pick an employee, we're not going to show the manager field. The approval log, we're going to hide it in new form and edit form. So approval log is only shown when we're viewing a request, not when we're editing it. The status, we're going to hide it in new item form. We're going to disable it in edit form. The remaining days, hide it when employee is empty. Vacation days, hide it when employee is empty. Days requested, just hide it except in the view form. So you can see we have multiple rules on multiple columns, and it's very easy for us to create a new one. For example, I can say, let's just pick title just to make things easy. And I'm going to say show it in these forms, or maybe disable it in these forms, or hide it in these forms. So if, for example, you have a list and you know how SharePoint lists require you to have title, but you don't want the user to edit the title or see it, you can hide it from the user. And then you can obviously do either default value, or as we'll see in a minute, you're able to do some dynamic value and populate the title based on what you want it to be. And then you can add conditions. Only hide it when the user is not a manager, or only hide it when the status is of a specific value. So column permissions is a very, very powerful tool in the tool belt. I would very much encourage you to go to the QuizCon website and see all the YouTube videos on dynamic column permissions, which show more powerful demonstrations of what you can do with it. But because we're running out of time, I want to show you the most powerful one, which is the custom actions together with activities. This is where we get to configure two types of let's call them actions, just because that's their name. One is automatic action that happens automatically, and one is an action that depends on the user clicking a button. So if I look at the custom actions that we have in the list, we can see we have 5 custom actions configured. One is request added, and you can see by the icon here that that's something that happens automatically. It doesn't wait for the user to do anything, except it listens for a new request being added. So that's what we call an automatic action, and it runs when an item is added. And activities is what it actually does. So we're saying when a request is added, run these activities. And what are these activities? Get the value of manager and store it. Update the current item. If we look at it, it sets manager to manager. So update the current item, set title title. Let's find something more interesting to talk to. Get the value of vacation days left from an items in form. So you can see here, it's doing a query on another list. It's going to employee vacations, which is our configuration list, and gets the remaining vacation days left, and then stores it in a variable. And then it updates the current item with that value. So it does a query to an external list and then stores the information, and then finally sends an email. So this is the email configuration where we're saying send an email to the person who's been specified in manager, set the subject to this, and set the body to all that. Now you notice here that I don't really have the way to edit it. That's because this is I'm currently looking at the custom action, which just says run all these activities. If I wanted to manage the activities, I have here the activities that have stuff like update title field, Set request status, update manager. Let's look at update manager. That's the email one. So update manager is an activity that, sorry, that's not the email one. That's just updates, sets the field manager to the value of the variable manager. Where that's get manager. Where's the email one? There we go. That's one email. There's the one I'm looking for. Send approval to request to manager. We look at the properties and we can see send it to the variable manager. So remember, manager is something we actually got from another list. It actually got from another list, and that's something that I'm yet to show you how we did it. But we have a variable called manager that is the result of that query. We know who the manager is, so we're going to say, going to send to the manager, and we're going to use this as a subject, and this is as the body. And you can see here the click to view request. And if we look at the source code of the HTML, you can see here in square brackets the ID. So that's the ID of the current item. So you can use tokens to actually populate this, and you can see here the insert token field button. You can actually populate it with values from the actual columns of the list. So you can customize the email fully with those with the values of that the user picked. So custom actions and custom activities, very, very powerful tools that allow us to do both the automatic automatic action that happens when the user saves the request, but also we have the buttons. So here's the button for the manager to approve the request. We look at the button, we can see, it's a button instead of automatic. This is the caption of the button. We can, if we want, specify custom icons for the button. And in the activities, we can see that what the button does, it updates the current item, sets some values, then checks to see if it's less than 5, then we set it to approve. If it's more than 5, we trigger the send email to HR manager and leave the status as it is. So that's an example of how you created this very, let's call it a complex workflow, but very simple solution for a complex workflow, where we just say we're going to have a button that checks what the days requested, and based on that decides, am I going to approve it or am I going to send it to HR? One last thing before we run out of time and I hand over back to Sarah. I want to show you some customizations that we did that are advanced customizations for developers. So QuizConform understands that in some scenarios, what you want to do cannot be achieved by all the predefined configurations that they've made available, all the things that I showed to you. In some cases, we do want to allow developers, for example, people like me who provide custom solutions to clients, to do things beyond what's available by the product. And for that, we have this nifty little icon, the cogwheel at the top, which allows us to configure, style, and add scripts to the form. The script editor especially is dear to my heart, because this allows people, again, people like me who live in JavaScript every day, write their own JavaScript to do things like you can see here on field change. We're going to do a lookup into the employee configuration list and grab the manager and grab the vacation days left. This is what I told you earlier. I'm going to show you how that's being grabbed. And it grabs all that information, stores it into variables that you saw earlier we used in the workflow. We told it, I need to use the manager and store it in the list item, and I need to use the manager to know who to send the email to. I also need to store the vacation days left and store it in the item, but I also need to update the remote list once it's approved, and reduce the number of vacation days taken, and well, increase the days taken and decrease the days left. So this is an example where if you have someone who knows JavaScript and can do things like that, you can integrate your own code into the form and do it in a supported fashion. There's examples for event handlers, so you can say, I want, can you add to the code something that happens on a certain field change? And you even get samples. You can say, if you want to kickstart, you don't know how to do. Here's an example of change the save button caption. So if I go back to the form, it currently says save, but if I wanted it to say something else, for example, submit, I'm going to say change save button caption. So it added to my script a sample code. Here we go, save button caption. It says, let's change it to finish. And I can say submit. And I can add my own logic to my code to change the button text. And the next time I load the form, it will the script will kick in and will change my button names. So QuizConf thought a lot about developers and integrators to give us the power to create much more powerful solutions than the tool initially allows. Not sure why that didn't take, but we are running out of time. Styles, you can add your, if you have a graphic designer, they can add their own style sets to the form. And in the configuration, that's just a link that allows us to jump into the settings that I showed you earlier. You don't have to do it from the list form. You can jump to it not from a list view, but from the list form. Well, that pretty much captures everything I wanted to show you, and I have a minute and a half to spare.